You're listening to Montreal Now with Aaron Rand and Natasha Hall on CJAD 800.
All right, that is James Mennie. He is over at the Montreal Gazette. And Jim, let me begin by this headline here suggesting the Legault government trying to pick a fight with public sector unions. How are they doing that exactly?
Well, listen, I want to preface this by saying that all public sector contract negotiations are forms of theater on both sides of the negotiating table. However, given the penchant that our premier has for really trying to depict unions as standing in the way of the Quebec nation, as being intransigent and placing all of our futures at risk because they want to keep doing things the old way. I'm not sure whether he mentioned this during healthcare reform 1.0, 2.0, or 9.0, but you see where this is going. He really doesn't, he's made it clear he doesn't much care for unions. And what happens today is the Common Front of Public Sector Unions, and they represent nearly 500,000 workers in Quebec, have asked for a mediator to come in with the negotiations because they're getting nowhere, and getting nowhere is sort of being exemplified by Treasury President Sonia LaBelle's desire expressed yesterday. Can we snap this up? Even if you work all the way through the summer, I don't care. Let's get these contracts closed. Yeah. Anyone who's been involved in collective bargaining knows this is not how you go into it. You don't sit across the negotiating table and look at your watch, because it doesn't really, it's not conducive to, how can I put it, a collegial atmosphere. But yeah, I mean, the Legault government is always in need of a villain. I've said it before, I'll say it again, and I don't be surprised if you see these contract talks go south. On top of everything else, you can imagine. And people will say, well, they're well paid and they get pensions, and maybe they are, but you can imagine that in the negotiating for the contracts, hearing that your bosses just voted themselves a $30,000 a year raise didn't exactly go over well.
Timing couldn't have been any worse. You think you could have made a deal first and then announced that you're giving yourself that $30,000 raise. But you're right. This is going to come up at every meeting, I would guess. At
every meeting. And for crying out loud, when you have, how can I put it, special guest stars like Bernard Drainville,
the worst
minister, who gets, he gets asked, I don't know if you guys have talked about this, he gets asked in an interview with Legault, a video interview, as saying, Quebec's M&As are now among the best paid in the country. Can their teachers expect to get the same kind of treatment? At which point he shoots back, are you seriously trying to compare the work of a teacher to that of an M&A?
That was really embarrassing. I
That's
saw that.
So typical. And that is our education minister. Yeah. And I mean, arguably, I saw it was Mara Whiskey who posted saying something to the effect of that many teachers would make great M&As, but the reverse cannot be said, that many M&As would make great teachers.
She was a teacher. She taught in university, and she was a substitute in grade 5. And she points out, I nearly got burnt. I got burned out. I couldn't do it after 5 weeks. So for Monsieur Drainville to turn around and basically say that a group of people who have been offered 9% over 5 years shouldn't be compared with people who just gave themselves basically a $30,000 a year raise. I'd say it's tone deaf, but you know what, guys? More and more, it's seeming like policy.
Yeah.
You wonder, though, in the case of Bernard Drainville, who seems to have made a pretty consistent habit of putting his foot in his mouth.
He's going to get canned.
I was going to say, do you think Francois Legault, and I know he's behind all his MPs as long as they're or MNAs as long as they're men. Does Bernard Drainville, is he pushing this window a little too far, do you think?
I think you just answered the question yourself. If his name was Bernice, he'd been out of it by now, but no, it's not going to happen.
Isn't that pathetic?
Okay.
I can't even believe that this is
you said this before.
Really,
I know.
Just the whole thing. Remember the helpline? You could call 1-800 whatever, and if you see sexual misconduct in school, this is the line to call. And they actually tested the line, and nobody was picking up.
Right. Nobody answered. Right.
Yeah. So.
Okay. Let's move on, shall we?
Yeah.
I want to, first of all, I'm going to ask Tom Mulcair this. Did you see David Johnston's opinion piece in the Gazette in the online
Yes,
one for tomorrow? What'd you think? So let me just clue people in. We'll talk about this in greater detail. He's basically, first of all, we know Pierre Poilievre has decided not to meet with him. this whole idea that he's going to be the rapporteur, that special inquiry.
Oh, excuse me for interrupting. The piece that's in the Gazette is by David Johnston, former Quebec Regional Director of the Official Languages Act, and my former colleague at the Gazette for 33 years. Not the same guy.
Not David Johnston.
No. It's David Johnston, but it's not that
David Johnston. Well, so much for that story.
Note.
That story talks about the fact that, this whole idea where we always say, Jim, or we've said here in the past, the Liberals have thrown Anglos under the bus with Bill C-13. He makes the point that it wasn't the Liberals. Go look at Aaron O'Toole. It's his fault.
Well, yeah, and to a certain extent, it's true. I mean, I've always said there's plenty of blame to go around. There's plenty of dollops from that big cauldron of cowardice in Ottawa to go to all the parties, and yes, even the revered NDP. And Dave, the thrust of David's piece is, listen, the Tories under O'Toole had made it clear, essentially, that Legault had carte blanche, that they were going to extend certainly the provisions of Bill 96 to federal institutions, which is hardly new. I mean, the NDP has been calling for that, good God, for nearly 20 years, maybe 15. But the suggestion that, it was the Tories who threw them under the bus first, and the Liberals were kind of handcuffed. They had to try and work around this because they didn't have the votes in the House of Commons. With all due respect to my friend David, I think that might be a very, how can I put it, sandpapered down a vision of how the Liberals have acted, because quite frankly, when it comes to certain other things, the Liberals have not, shown any kind of, concern about, going full speed ahead. The best way I would put it is that there's plenty of blame, or if you will, credit, for going around when it comes to how this whole 96 into Bill C-13 was treated. And in fact, it's kind of like the end of a political Agatha Christie novel. In fact, they all did it.
Okay. I just want to go back to the one thing that we didn't get to discuss, your top story, this ex-CAC M&A confirming that the caucus dare not cross the party line. So there will be no Anthony Housefathers in the CAC caucus.
No,
what's this about?
Not. And it was kind of, the reason I mentioned it's kind of spooky. We were talking about this yesterday, and how it seems to be, my perception was this seems to be normal now in all political parties in Canada. And I have confirmation, not just from Emily Foster, who is a former CAC M&A, and who simply decided not to run again in 2022. But I also have that confirmed by no less an authority than Pierre Fitzgibbon, who was asked about this today and said, no. M&As can have they have free speech. They can say what they want, this and that. He goes, you do have party lines that you have to follow. Every party is like that, which is kind of interesting because I remember the CAC was trying to, sell itself off as a party qui n'était pas comme les autres, but apparently it's pas mal comme les autres. And perhaps he was being a bit pointed in his comments as well, simply because Madame Foster had said she was very uncomfortable as an MNA, essentially being compelled by party lines to vote against an ethics committee report. Don't ask me which one, because there's so many that have found against Mr. Fitzgibbon. So there you go. But there might be hope. And I've said before, you have a 90-member caucus, a lot of newbies in there. It's a long way to the next election. Maybe some folks will turn around and say, maybe I don't like playing the game this way.
I wonder what goes through Geneviève Guilbeault's head, when she just sees the way women are treated, the way I wonder, as the deputy minister, it'd be interesting to talk to her off the record. Not going to happen, obviously.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't put too much stock in that because, as you just mentioned, she's deputy premier. So
yeah.
All right, James Mennie, thank you. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Adam.